What you are looking at is a poster. We created it 4 years ago after Insider Advantage accurately polled the Iowa Democratic Caucus. It was a year in which Howard Dean was viewed to be winning. Then a poll came out from John Zogby that showed that Dean was declining and John Kerry was moving up. But by the time the caucus was actually held, most of the major pollsters had the race, quote, a statistical dead heat. Insider Advantage did the exact same thing, which we did in our poll earlier this week. We surveyed the second choice of individuals whose candidate did not receive the requisite 15%. And we came out with John Kerry winning substantially. That is the poll we had up. What you are looking at is a quote from Robert Novak in his column just days before the primary, mentioning a little-known company called Insider Advantage that primarily polled in the South, and saying that we had, for well, in essence, a formula that we had used that might suggest that the race was not as close as everyone thought. I thought you might want to see that and see the ad that we took out in the Manchester Union Leader the next week. We didn't choose to poll in New Hampshire. We decided to wait for South Carolina. Now, during the South Carolina race, a lot of folks had General Wesley Clark beating John Edwards in that state. There was only one problem. They were reading the title of each individual when they would ask the ballot question. And so people would be asked the question if they were voting for retired General Wesley Clark in a big military state. As a result, they got their polls wrong. We're not always right, but I do want to address our poll the other day, and I also want to give you some new polling numbers. I'm Matt Towery for Insider Advantage and the Southern Political Report. Let me start out by saying one thing. Any pollster can be wrong in this Iowa caucus this time. It is a mess. As I've said from the very beginning, it's being held right after New Year's. You do have an Orange Bowl on TV that some people want to watch. You've also got other distractions. You don't know what the weather's going to be like. You just can't really determine what's going to happen with this Iowa caucus. But we did release a poll showing John Edwards doing much better than most of the other pollsters have done. I want to comment on that, though, because there is a fly in the ointment. We'll have to see when we start polling again in Iowa next week if in fact it has taken hold. The major news organizations have not reported on an alleged, and I want to emphasize, alleged affair that John Edwards had with a former campaign worker who had been filming him for web video. Now, allegedly, according to the National Enquirer, this woman had the affair with John Edwards and is now pregnant. Now, even more bizarre, there is a statement apparently from a person named Andy Young, not the Andy Young that we all know from around the world, but who had worked in the campaign of John Edwards at one time, is not involved in it right now. He's married, has children, and has reportedly, allegedly said that he is the father of this child. Now, this is a bizarre story. The National Enquirer, many times where there's smoke, there's fire. And so I'm not going to completely discount this story just because it's coming from the, from the National Enquirer. Excuse me. At the same time, I don't know whether the national media feels that they have enough information or that the sources are strong enough to pick up this story. So how will this affect John Edwards? Well, it may not affect him because MSNBC or CNN or ABC don't run the story. But is it possible that the folks who go to grocery stores in Iowa will see the National Enquirer and see the story? And how many people would be affected by that? Will the rumor mill get going? So we may be seeing a real flux. We may see a change, a shift again. He may no longer be the second preference of people when we go back in the field. I don't know what the effect of this is, but I know one thing. It's being underplayed by the traditional news organizations, and they're not talking about something that I guarantee you, by the time this election is held, people are going to be talking about. You can't hide something like this, even if it comes from the National Enquirer. Yes, the National Enquirer reportedly has close ties to the Clinton campaign. Do we know if the Clinton campaign put somebody up to it? We have no way of knowing. Is this dirty pool or is it real reporting? We have no way of knowing. But we can't just malign an organization that prints something out and just ignore it, because there are going to be hundreds of thousands of copies of that National Enquirer story going into Iowa. So it certainly is going to be read by a lot of people, and I think that's something that people are missing right now. Now, something else people are missing, and that is that on the Republican side, Mike Huckabee continues to do well in numerous states. In Georgia, a brand new poll taken in Georgia for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, just released today by Insider Advantage, with a total of 823 individuals questioned, margin of error plus or minus 3%. Mike Huckabee leads the race with 36%. Rudy Giuliani is 14%. Romney is 12%. Thompson is 10%. And McCain is 10%. Most of the other candidates really don't show up very much in the poll, although I will say, and I've said over and over again, I do think that you're going to find that Ron Paul number, which shows up pretty small in the polls, is going to be a stronger number, particularly when you get up in Iowa in the early states. Now, on the Democratic side, I think we have these Democratic numbers as well. Let me check. On the Democratic side, again, you're seeing in Georgia the same thing that we saw in South Carolina. Now, understand, people thought the South Carolina poll that we had showing Obama leading Clinton was just dead wrong because they just can't imagine how that could be the case. It's very simple math, folks. South Carolina, 50% of the people who vote in that primary are African American. If he gets even 10% of the white vote and he brings in the lion's share of the African American vote, and this all occurred after Oprah Winfrey went down to South Carolina, then he wins South Carolina. And if you don't trust me, trust Lee Bandy, who's been covering politics down there for 40 years. Lee has said he thinks it's shifting towards Obama. Well, guess what? Georgia is another state that has that same set of circumstances. Very high African American participation in its primary. The Democratic primary in Georgia, very heavy African American. Obama has now moved to the lead. He's at 33%. Clinton is at 31%. Edwards is at 15, about 16%. The rest really don't scratch. The undecided, it's about where it should be. It's about 15%. Now, does this mean that Obama's going to win Georgia? No. It does mean, however, that Edwards and Clinton are cutting into each other. Edwards getting 15% is cutting into Clinton's support that she receives from white voters. And she's losing a lot of the African American vote that at one point she was receiving. The other thing that's very interesting is she continues to hover in every single poll at around 35% support from females. She's got to get her female numbers up. If she doesn't get those female numbers up, she will not win any of these primaries. She has to be in the running as a female candidate. And if she does not embrace that, Hillary Clinton won't make it through this primary season. I expect to see that shift, and I expect to see that begin to occur fairly soon. I've seen races like Elizabeth Dole. When at one time she ran, she didn't do so well because she would not embrace the fact that she was a woman. She then decided to say, I am a woman. I'm be the first U.S. Senator, female U.S. Senator from in North Carolina. That's the sort of thing that works because it brings the female vote out and galvanizes it. And I'm not seeing Senator Clinton do that right now. Now, this is our last filming until after Christmas, so a lot can take place. And part of the reason that I showed this is because we took a lot of bumps from one person in particular who questioned our polling and questioned our methodology. Let me just lay this out, okay? You can go Google it, you can go look it up, and you can take it to the bank, okay? Bob Novak, January 19th, we got Iowa right. South Carolina, other networks and organizations had Edwards neck and neck with Wesley Clark. We had it Edwards winning by a mile. State after state after state we polled in 2004, we got it right. And on other states and in other races, we're hardly ever wrong. Now that's not bragging if it's true. So for everybody who wants to fiddle with our numbers or question the way we weight things or say that, gosh, there's just no way that could be, why don't you do this? Why don't you figure that, yes, pollsters will make mistakes, and yes, we will make mistakes at some point. We may be off on Iowa. Anybody can be off on Iowa. But give us a little bit of credit, guys. We've been doing this for a long damn time. And guess what? We're damn good. Have a nice Christmas.